Welcome back to our MATLAB tutorial on using looping structures to navigate through a two-dimensional matrix. So as we discussed earlier, our code goes through the first row within the outer for loop, but in the inner for loop it increments through every column for that row. Then the outer for loop increments to the second row, and then the inner for loop increments through all the columns for that row. Then the outer for loop increments to the third row, then the inner for loop increments through all the columns for that row. And then our code has been taking all the values for this two-dimensional matrix and it's been storing them in this vector right here. And that's what the index value did. So for each one of these, we took that row comma column value, so that index in the sample matrix, and stored it into a matrix to vector, which is just a vector with an index that we called index that started at 1, and then we manually increment it as we go. So if we run our code and go back to the command window, we can click on matrix to vector, and then that brings up this window to show us what the variable value is. So here we see that it's a 1 by 9 vector. The first terms are 1, 3, and 5, like we had right here, 1, 3, and 5, then 2, 4, 6, 10, 11, 12. 2, 4, 6, 10, 11, 12. So that means that our code did what it was supposed to do. It took the terms from that two-dimensional sample matrix, and using a looping structure, it went through each term of that matrix. And so this is really helpful because sometimes in MATLAB, let's get a new page on here quick. Sometimes in MATLAB you'll have data a lot of times, and that data will be in a two-dimensional matrix. You'll have lots of rows or columns, lots of rows, and you'll have a lot of data in here. You know, numbers everywhere. And when you're doing calculations with that data, you'll want to be able to either increment through a column, increment through a row, or increment through the entire matrix one term at a time. And so knowing that if you have that matrix, you can use nesting for loops to increment through the rows and columns to look at each term separately. And that's something that's going to be very handy when you do more intense analyses later on in your MATLAB career.